Welcome to this Euranet Plus debate presented within the Citizens Corner concept. The debate is produced and hosted by Euranet Plus and Polskie Radio, a member of the Euranet Plus network. Today we discuss European social security policy and how we can make it easier for people to exercise their right to work in another member state. The debate will be followed live from the European Parliament on our Euranet Plus Inside website, on our Facebook profile, as well as on Twitter. Users can comment, share, react and interact. Going to discuss European social security and job mobility today, we're joined by Janusz Lewandowski, a Polish MEP with the centre-right EPP and a former European Commissioner for Financial Programming and Budget. Ulla Turnes, Danish Liberal MEP and Vice Chair of the Employment and Social Affairs Committee, and Christian Scheving, member of the European Economic and Social Committee. We'll also be joined by Jonathan Todd, Commissioner Laszlo Andor, spokesperson for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. We're joined today also by students from our campus radio networks, Paulina Kakareko from Poland and Siri Esto from Finland. Welcome. Let's start with youth mobility. We have so many young unemployed across Europe, and still we have millions, or 2.8 million vacancies across Europe. How do we join the dots here? How do we get people into employment in different countries? Let's start with Ulla.
I'm coming from a country, Denmark, where I think we have managed to deal with youth unemployment in a good way. We have a tradition of especially vocational training where the young people are taking part of their education as employee in the enterprises, and we have tried to also do this with the university studies. So if you are a student at Copenhagen University and you study law, you have been in an office with a lawyer when you graduate, and this makes the step to the labor market less. How can I say? It's much more smooth.
Okay.
So actually, I've managed to convince the employment committee to come to Denmark and to have a closer look into.
I bet they're delighted at that.
what we have done. Of course, we also have things to learn from other countries, but to be honest, the challenge is really huge when it comes to Southern European countries and of course also Eastern European countries where the situation is much different.
Janusz Lewandowski, how is the situation in Poland? Are young people able to move easily for work?
Well, they are moving. Poland is on the move, which is to some extent the skills drain. The same for Latvia, Lithuania and the other countries. So this is the other side of the coin. However, mobility is the answer to the problems. The price and wage and salary differentials making it a real problem. However, when we are discussing the issue of youth unemployment or employment opportunities, it is very good to manage expectations. The major responsibility, the major toolbox is at the level of national states. Therefore, and that is why we have less than 5% unemployment in Austria, low unemployment in Denmark, and high unemployment in many countries of the south. So this is sentence number one. Major responsibility and major toolbox remains and is to remain at the level of member states. We have some additional devices, given the gravity of situation, more also in budgetary terms, we have front-loaded a lot in order to additionally on the subsidiarity principle to help. But this is really subsidiarity. This is not a full recipe.
Your Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, is leading by example. He's leaving Poland and moving to Brussels.
Well, the job is already in place. However, there is some migration among officials, yes. This is migration.
Okay, Krista, the Youth Guarantee, it was shouted about a lot, and now we're hearing there's no money, it's not enough. Is it enough to really give an incentive for mobility?
So we did at the European Economic and Social Committee is carrying out a study on the stakeholders' perception in 6 countries about youth guarantee, about the instruments and what should take place and what is taking place actually. So what we compared is countries like where it's going better than in others, like Finland, Austria, with countries where it's less well going, like Croatia, like Slovakia, like Italy and Greece. And what we saw there is, first of all, that it's of utmost importance to involve the stakeholders, because if you don't have an education system in place that's very close to the needs of the companies and to the needs of the labor market, then you don't succeed. So this is one of the main assets that we saw in all the countries.
Okay, that brings us to Jonathan Todd. You put your headset on there, I think, sir. No headset.
No headset? No.
Give me a second. The youth guarantee is really about getting, part of it's really about getting people into apprenticeships in this kind of approach, matching this gap between leaving employment and leaving education, getting them into employment quickly within 4 months, for example. Is this something you see results from already, or is it just going to take a long time to produce fruit?
Well, we've seen results from the model in Finland and Austria, which is why we've tried to introduce it across the EU. But I think it's important to emphasise that this is a major structural reform. So it's not something which is going to give results from one day to the next. It requires long-term investment in public employment services so as to improve their capabilities to match up young people with the job opportunities that do exist and are in line with their qualifications and experience, or if no such jobs can be found, to match them up with training and education opportunities that will give them the skills and experience to improve their employability for the future. It's not something which is going to bring down youth unemployment within a very short space of time. It's an investment so as to ensure that when the economy recovers, that it will be a job-rich recovery and that a greater proportion of young people will be able to get a job. So, I mean, it's complicated, but at the same time, it's very simple. I mean, basically, it's all about either finding young people a suitable job or giving them the education, skills and experience that will help them to get a job in the future.
Does the Commission feel it has sufficient control over the funds involved in this? We hear stories about Spain misspending its funds in terms of giving tax benefits. To businesses which are not benefiting younger employees and young graduates particularly.
I wouldn't be critical per se of subsidies to employers because, I mean, if the result is that the young person is offered work experience that they wouldn't otherwise get, and if that work experience is relevant to them getting a job elsewhere in the future, then it's a good investment of that money. Do we feel we have enough control? Well, we have quite a lot of control because the major source of money from the EU to invest in youth guarantee comes from the European Social Fund. And before we pay over the social fund money, we have to agree with each and every member state the overall agreement on how the money is going to be spent over the next 7 years until 2020. And then we have to agree on the individual operational programs as to how the money is going to be invested. And there has been a detailed process of assessing individual member states' implementation plans for the Youth Guarantee. Okay. They all submitted their plans end of last year or beginning of this year. We've been going through those plans with them, and we have been commenting on them inter alia through the country-specific recommendations as part of the European semester.
Okay, let's look at some of the practical aspects of this. Euranet, for example, is supposed to be a job matching website, matching young people in one country with jobs in another, trying to solve this problem. Some of our students have been speaking about Euranet with their compatriots recently. Celia, what was the experience that you heard?
So,
do you think that the Euranet is working from what you heard?
If I say just in one word, so I would say no, because currently there are 5.2 million young people who are unemployed in European Union, and there are more than 2 million open vacancies in Euranet portal. So why is the situation like this?
Okay, and Paulina, you have any experience of Euranet? Do you think it's working?
Well, actually, no. I've spoken to some young people, at least in Poland, and I asked them whether they know anything about Euranet, whether they've heard about this. And the answer was no, they do not know. So I think the basic problem is to make them get to know about the existence and the possibility that it creates.
Okay, Jens Lewandowski, do you think there's a communication problem with this as well?
This is a communication problem. However, again, I have to repeat that we should manage expectations and as to what the European Union can do. That is a good example that you cannot do a miracle. For employment, you need employers. For employers, you need growth. Our prospect, I think, in many countries in Europe is rather jobless growth. Therefore, we need some artificial devices, some incentives to promote employment in such a stagnant economy. That is why I am also in favor of all sorts of solutions at the European level, including youth guarantee. Let's hope that this is not just a declaration, but it might be operational program giving jobs, real jobs.
Ola, what do you think?
I fully agree with what has been said about EURES, that it is not known either by young people nor by others. But do you have any proposals of what we can do to make it more known among the young people? Campaigns or what is actually needed? Or is it when you go to ask for a job, you're not being aware of that there are also jobs to seek in other European countries? Is that what is actually lacking? Because then it's the authorities, both in Denmark, in Poland, and Finland and elsewhere, who are not actually aware of the situation in other European countries. Is that what is actually missing?
Paulina, what do you think? Is this missing?
Well, yes, probably. Another question that I wanted to ask you is that whether possibly in the future, well, I think it may be connected, the youth guarantees could possibly work in between European countries, not just in those particular countries, but between European Union countries.
Okay, we had a lot of reports out from the Commission this week also about Erasmus and the way in which we're trying to educate across borders as well. And the long-term benefits of Erasmus seem to be, first of all, higher income, more stable jobs, and also a level of communication within the European market as well. Graduates studying in one country and bringing investment into that country when they later in their careers as well. Jonathan Todd, what are the big priorities for the Commission at the moment? Education, is this the way forward for solving the employment problem?
Well, education is certainly a big part of the problem because all too often the young people just don't have the skills that or qualifications that employers are looking for. I mean, I would say come back to this issue of the 2 million unfilled vacancies. I don't think that's a problem of EURES not working. I mean, EURES is not a European agency. It's a network of national public employment services. So if the national public employment service is not working well, how can EURES work well? But clearly, Erasmus has made a huge contribution simply because by studying in another member state, young people are far more open to working in another member state. And the chances are that they will acquire language skills that will help them to get a job in another member state. And on the youth guarantee front, I mean, I think it's not necessarily useful to look at it in terms of making it an international thing. But the fact is that if you improve a young person's employability because they acquire skills and qualifications and experience which is relevant to getting a job, that job doesn't have to be in the same member state. Their employability is increased in terms of looking for jobs anywhere in Europe.
Christian.
Yeah. Just coming back to EURES, I think I just can echo what the two colleagues just said. It's not working due to the fact that the national public employment services in a lot of member states do not work. They work in some and quite well, but the people are not really willing to post open vacancies, on the EURES. But however, I think that acquiring skills through mobility is one big asset. It does not even need to be really a job, but it's just the way that you work in a different member state and there you acquire work experience. If you go back or if you stay, whatever, the most important thing is that you get the skills on the job, that you get the training on the job. I think that is what makes you employable.
Okay. Jens Lewandowski, let's talk a little bit about the Social Security network in terms of what people lose when they go to a different country, for example. There's been an issue between Poland and the UK. One, just probably you commented, one thing we notice about the Polish in this as well is that many Poles have left the UK to go back to their own countries, to Poland in particular. And this has been to the detriment of the UK as well, as they were greatly valued when they were there. How do you see this working in the future?
It would be fantastic to have back our youngsters invading Ireland and Great Britain home. However, majority staying because we cannot offer them the same wage opportunity. There is still such a huge differential between east and western part of United Europe, that it is motivating simply people to stay and seek better life in Great Britain or in Ireland. But I have to say that apart from EURES and the other devices, this is about risk-taking. I don't understand why, given the situation in Spain, there is such a small mobility in direction Germany, Austria. Poles without linguistic skills were taking risk. And this was not dependent upon EURES. This was dependent upon advice of families, of those who are already sitting in Dublin or in London. So different channels of communicating and encouraging to go, which is not quite good for Polish economy.
Okay, I've heard some English people say that the Poles speak better English than the Scots. I don't know if that's true. Jonathan Todd, are you English or Scottish?
I'm English, and my experience, many Scots people speak better English than the English people.
So the European Commission, in terms of the Social Security network, are looking at pensions. You leave one country, the Minister of Nightmare, and we're speaking in Belgium here today. It's not the easiest country to deal with in terms of administration. How do we get to a mobility level where you can have unemployment benefits in a different country with relative ease if it doesn't work out? You know, if you take the risk to go to another country for a job and it doesn't work out, what do we do? And in pensions as well, how mobile are our pensions?
Well, actually, there's quite a lot of coordination. I mean, the basic principle is that when you move to work in another country, you have to be treated in exactly the same way as that country's workers. And that's a fundamental principle of EU Social Security rules. Another principle is that you shouldn't get Social Security benefits in two places at once. I mean, it's either one country or the other. If you're unemployed in one country, you are able to go and look for work in another country for up to 3 months and have your unemployment benefit paid by the country from which you have come, and in some cases countries extend that for up to 6 months. So that possibility already exists, and as Mr. Lewandowski was saying, often it's more a question of people willing to take risks. Many Spanish people want to stay close to their families. They want to stay in that nice climate they have, close to the Mediterranean, and they don't fancy heading off to Northern Europe. Whereas many Polish people have proven that they are willing to take risks. They have friends and family who go to countries like the UK and Ireland. It works out for them, and their friends and family come and join them, and that's how it works.
Paulina, do you think it's a cultural issue that in terms of risk-taking, leaving your country to go and start a new life somewhere else, it's a cultural thing?
I think it's partially cultural thing, and I wonder what can be done in order to help immigrants assimilate from the upper levels. Like, for example, I was speaking to some young people in Poland. They are afraid to go because of the language barrier. So I don't know, some solutions that could help people assimilate language, other...
Better to come back. That should be.
Jonathan wants to come back on this.
Yeah, well, we did actually get the Council of Ministers and Parliament to adopt a directive earlier this year which requires member states to put in place networks to raise awareness about workers' rights when they're working in another country and requires them to put in place redress mechanisms if they run into problems, for example, of discrimination in terms of pay, because that's illegal. So that will help, I think, once member states put those mechanisms in place, as they're obliged to now.
Well, what would you like to see done in the next 5 years during the term of this next commission? What would be let's say the three priorities? What do you want to see out of this?
But I think when it comes to social security, we are facing a big challenge, because coming from a country where we have a tax-paid social security system, people are very afraid that mobility is going to damage the way we are organizing our social welfare. And the Danes and other countries don't want to change their tax-paid social security system. But it causes challenges when we have mobility, and I'm very much in favor of mobility, but we have to find the right balance between mobility, which is necessary and a good thing, and then access to social welfare, especially when it's tax-paid social welfare.
Okay.
And this, I must underline. This is not a question of discriminating, because this is also what goes for citizens from that very country.
Lewandowski.
This is also a question of politics,
because it is politics.
Politics is about perception, and this is so high on agenda also of European elections. Although we have all the studies saying that immigration rather is contributing in net terms to the social welfare system, also in Great Britain and Ireland, but we are fighting with this is like a vicious circle. Politicians are reacting to real problems of local communities, but then setting it as an important European agenda against the facts. And
yes,
but I fully agree. When you look into the numbers, mobility is a good thing. It's raising our welfare. It's we're getting more rich on this by mobility, but it's not a question of figures. What I'm talking about.
Well,
this is principles.
Statistically, though, immigrants are better value for money. If you look at it as a business.
Yeah. So it's not a question of economy or statistics. It's a question of principles. And we have in my country a situation where when you come to Denmark, you immediately have access to child care benefit. But it is not so that the children needs to live in Denmark. You can send this benefit to other countries. You can send this abroad.
This is universal European.
Let's say Jonathan Todd.
Yeah, I mean, that's the case in every member state.
No, it's
yes,
not.
Yes, it is.
No.
It is an obligation under Regulation 883/2004 and under the treaty itself
in Sweden
to pay child benefit even if the child is in another member state. Because you cannot discriminate between two workers, one who happens to be Danish, one who happens to come from another member state, paying the same taxes, same social security. Why should you discriminate against them? And let's bear in mind that if that worker did bring their children to live in Denmark, then Denmark would have to pay not only the benefit, but also the costs of healthcare for those children and the cost of educating those children. And let's also not forget that even the OECD has pointed out, even Denmark is a net recipient of benefits from.
But I started out saying
they pay more into the social security system and tax system.
I started out by saying this is not about economy. This is not about statistics. This is about politics. It's about principles. And people in Denmark are worried that we cannot keep our tax-paid welfare system as we would like to, because it's getting too expensive. So this, I'm just referring to what we have been discussing for months in Denmark, and I'm a pro-European. I'm very much in favor of mobility, and I would like to find a solution on this challenge. And I think the solution should be found at a European level and not at a Danish level. And in Sweden, by the way, it is so that the children needs to have it needs to live in Sweden, or else you cannot get the child.
Donald Tusk had a standout fight with David Cameron about this issue as well. What was the outcome of that discussion?
Again, this is a second wave, because the first wave was discussion about the Polish plumber in France, on occasion of a referendum, although this is a missing sector in French economy. They would like to have more plumbers. This was
to fix the leaks in the government, you think?
That was so easy to provoke the issue as one of the most important issues. So this is again about politics, about perception, and this is an absolutely good mission for politicians to contradict prejudice or misconception on the basis of facts. This is one of our missions.
Okay, John's satisfied with that answer for the moment. Okay, quick answer then.
I would just say, the more migrants that go to Denmark, the better off the welfare system will be, because they're net contributors to the welfare system. And I do wish that the political debate would reflect that fact.
Okay.
It is reflecting that fact.
Chrissy, do you think it's reflecting the fact that migrants are better value workers? They demand less of the social security system, and they are more likely to be employed in employment than a national.
Definitely, that's the case. I mean, it's
so why does this message not get across?
I think for mainly 2 or 3 reasons. One is cultural perception. Cultural perception also from the country of origin, because it's not in every culture that you are mobile and that you're on the move. No. And the second thing is also from the recipient countries, because there is a lot of reluctance in our member states. I think in all of our member states, during the last years we had to figure and to face a rise of nationalism, and we had to face a rise of how shall I say that, neglectance and really non-appreciation of foreigners. I put it entre guillemets. And I think, I don't know what can be done about this, but this is for me, it has a lot to do with mindset, and mindset can only be changed by facts, and that the more you make people move, the more you can prove the contrary.
Okay, Celia, do you think there's prejudice within Finland?
I haven't noticed that something like that. Or I can say if a Finnish person is going to work in another EU country, so there's going to be something like that. Employers usually think that Finnish people are hard workers, so I think that Finnish people are quite wanted workers abroad too. And of course, I would say that in Finland the problem, or I can't say maybe the problem, but the issue is about the immigrants who are coming outside the EU. So I would like to
Okay, let's put this to John Todd. Do we need to tighten up our immigration from outside the EU?
Well, that's a matter for each member state. There's no EU competence whatsoever as regards the incoming migrants from third countries. So that's up to each member state to decide on its own. We're not going to start at the EU level telling member states whether they should let in people or not.
Okay, Ulla, do you think that we should limit immigration from outside the EU and give preference to, clear preference to EU member state mobility?
But there is a clear preference to EU member states' mobility, and I would like to keep that because that is the whole idea of the European Union and our cooperation. So there is, and there should be. And I agree with Jonathan that it's up to the the single country to decide on their asylum policy mainly.
Okay, and there's another contradiction as well, because the asylum policy, the numbers are minuscule by comparison with overall mobility, and the number of immigrants living in different countries is really quite small if we look at it on an annualized basis. And part of the problem is with the headlines where we say there's so many immigrants coming in, but nobody talks about the number of immigrants who actually leave and the net difference in this as well. Mr. Lewandowski, in Poland, do people feel prejudiced when they think of going to work in the UK in particular?
Well, we are among the typical immigrant countries, so people are used to find themselves and not to create a ghetto. Polish ghettos are existing in Chicago and New York, but not necessarily in Europe. But again, this is of how much of Poland could be on the move. I remember there is in existence a program, Youth on the Move, and I was asked in Riga, in Latvia, not to promote too much the program because Latvia is already on the move. So they don't need the promotion of that sort of program. But we have the other wave of immigrants coming from East, from Ukraine, also from the other countries, and this is how it is working. For them, Poland is a promise of better life.
Okay. Also, there's the issue of the brain drain. California absorbs a lot of the world's intellect, and it stands as I think the 9th largest economy in the world as a consequence, because intellectual property is a big part of that. Jonathan, do you think we suffer from brain drain issues in Europe?
I think we do. Certainly in some countries, they have suffered, for example, from very large proportions of their health workers going to work in other member states, creating real problems for the healthcare system. You get, for example, doctors from Romania going to work as nurses in the UK because they can earn more as a nurse than they can as a doctor back home. And obviously this is fundamentally unfair because one country is paid for and invested in persons' training and education, and then they go and work somewhere else. Now, you can't prevent people from doing that, but I mean, what you can do is try to ensure a more balanced economic development of the various member states and address those economic disparities. And you can do that to some extent with help from the structural funds. There is also the fact that it's not entirely negative, because the people who go and work in another member state, they pay remittances back home, and they often acquire skills and experience which they can then apply when they go back home. So it's not entirely a negative experience, but nevertheless, it can be a problem for some professions and for some member states, yes, and we have to be aware of that.
Okay, Krista, I just want to ask you a question on Facebook here. Is it not a contradiction, this is from Alexander Glogowski, is it not a contradiction between aims targeted by the new Commission, like the Youth European Guarantee, and cuts in the EU budget?
No, it's not. Sorry. But the budget for the youth guarantee is already there. I mean, you cannot find with 6 billion euros, you cannot, of course, solve the whole problem. But what you can do, and what is done, and that's the most valuable thing, is that you start pushing member states to do structural reforms. And as I just said at the beginning, if you don't have the education that is correct, then if you don't have the essay or the first try to get people to do a job. Jonathan Ted was mentioning subsidies for employers. We have the experience in Austria that works very well, in fact, and these people have done the experience, and then they are more employable. So what is the aim behind? I mean... Okay,
in Austria, youth unemployment is about 9% or less, and in Spain we're talking 55%. It doesn't sound like a single market, does it?
Not really, no.
So what's the secret of success in Austria?
Well, it's the dual education system. It's the vocational training, of course. And it's that we try to do quite a lot to ease the transition between school and work. I think these are the main points. And that we always tried to have our education system and vocational training especially as close to the needs of enterprises. And, social partners are heavily involved in that. So they really know which abilities and which knowledge is necessary to carry out certain professions. And this, of course, then integrates into the education system. That's the secret of it. Okay, Ms. Lewandowski, which structural reforms would you like to see carried out in a hurry? Structural reforms within the countries to help achieve what we just discussed? Again, the responsibility of member states. Politically, very difficult is to reform the labour markets. But generally, the model of flexicurity, Scandinavian model, plus vocational training, fashionable, but now spreading fashion, but good fashion, that is a recipe, I think. But structural reforms of the labour market, let us take the case of France, are not politically rewarding. Have to be done. Here is the real issue for Europe, for the social model of Europe, plus all the devices we have mentioned at the table. Okay, structural reforms. Denmark, do we need more?
We have done a lot. We have done pension reforms. We have done retirement reforms. Also, I mean, with this youth perspective, to make sure that there would also be room for young people at the labor market. But of course, we are like other countries in need of of the labor force. So and ahead of us, we have a huge challenge with people getting older and less people in the labor force. So I mean, we cannot afford to lose all these young people in Europe as we are facing right now. So something needs to be done.
Okay, this is a time bomb as well. We've got an aging population which is eating itself to death and making itself more obese and giving itself more cancer in the process as well. And people don't seem to sense the looming reality of what's coming 20 years down the line. How do we restructure? The workforce to be able to pay these pensions, pay for the healthcare? Krista.
Well, get them into work. I mean, that's the most important thing to do.
And then they're going to have to work for longer as well.
That's of course, that's for sure. But try to put the people where they're really needed, because facing in Central Europe really a decline in, we don't have enough workers, and on the other hand, Spain has quite a lot of them. But it's not dependent on how high your education is. It's dependent that you have the right skills.
Okay. Celia, you have a question?
Yeah, so could you name maybe some concretical things how we could make young people work? How could they find work? Because now we have Erasmus exchange, so it has helped young people to find new job. Or then we have this Euranet portal on the youth guarantee. But what kind of new ways there would be?
Okay, let me just, before you answer, there is a sense of entitlement, particularly in the northern hemisphere as well, that I went to university, therefore I'm entitled to a certain type of job and a certain salary with it, and if I don't get it, I'm not working in Starbucks. And do you think that's true, Mr. Lewandowski?
That's right. That is a question also visible in Poland. That was the ambition of my generation, not always ready to find high education to grant it to their children. So we were almost in Guinness Book as for number of students, but this is not equal to quality. And then this is a disaster in labor market, because it's not matching the shortages of skill. So again, to be ready, the answer is very simple. Sometimes be ready to take the job below your educational level.
Okay, good advice. Jonathan and then Pauline.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to the structural reform issue, I mean, one of the most important structural reforms is to, on the basis of better links between the world of work and the world of education, is to ensure that the qualifications that young people get are actually relevant to the work, to the labour market. It's been a particular problem in Italy, for example. The higher education system has just been completely out of touch with the labour market. So we need to concentrate on improving that dialogue between employers and education establishments, so as to help them to produce the young people with the type of degree and type of qualifications that employers are actually looking for, and help them get a job.
Okay, Pauline, you have a comment? Question?
Yeah, I have a question. You said that you have perfected this transition from school, from university to work for young people. So what are the exact solutions? What can be done? What can we teach? What can young people be taught in order to get more practice than theory and get a job more easier?
Football is a good future.
Apart from football.
Not for Austria in any case. We're not known for that. No, but the point is really that if you do a vocational training, that you don't do just an academic education, but that you do a practical training, that you do a training on the job. That means, for instance, an Austrian apprentice, he stays 4 days in the enterprise and 1 day at school. So this is how you see that's a difference between countries we saw in Slovakia, where you just go to school and you don't have any practical advice. And just echoing again, higher education, I couldn't more underline what was just said. If you have a higher education which does not matter to the labor market, Slovakia, social scientists, mass of it, they end up taxi driving because nobody needs so many social scientists. So you should think of that before, which makes it important to have some advice at the beginning of your career. When you choose your career path, you should have a proper advice. And this could be given also by the public employment services, of course. But that needs also structural reforms.
Maybe we need to match psychology students as taxi drivers, and they can have therapy as they're being driven along. Mr. Lewandowski, the Polish have a great reputation as hard workers, and there are a lot of people across Europe who don't have this reputation. What's the secret of the Polish cultural attitude?
I wouldn't exaggerate. This is again about the stereotypes. I think every nation has ability and potential to be a hard worker. As for Poles, to some extent, this is a revolution in perception, because this was not always like that. This was a stereotype of Polnische Wirtschaft, that is a concept of rather anarchy and not well-organized economy. But I wouldn't say they are going to improve their life, and they appreciate the opportunity. Therefore, they are hard workers, but I think everybody can. Yes, they can.
I think you're being too kind. Ulla, we have 1 minute left, so let's get a couple of quick questions here, quick responses. The long-term mobility issue, is key to that is language. How do we solve the language problem?
Whew, wow.
You have 10 seconds.
Of course, it's about education. It's about primary education, to make sure that there are access to different languages in primary education, and of course also in higher education.
Mobility.
And then exchange, mobility
Erasmus.
exchange, Erasmus, and other programs like that.
Okay, so quality of education starts at the junior years, not waiting until we're getting to senior school and making these choices. Okay, we're going to round up here, and we've talked about a lot of themes today. Vocational training, but key, I think, has been the mindset. There has to be a change of mindset. Younger people particularly have to be ready to accept lower paid jobs simply to get into the workspace and to get on the mobility ladder as well. It's easier to get a job if you're already employed. Doesn't matter what that is. That's certainly a lot of people's experience. But the expectations we have to be managed as well. The European Union can't do everything. Member states have a lot of responsibility. Youth guarantee is not well funded, but it's in place and it's a start. And the long-term innovations that are required in the marketplace as well, structural reforms, education, language education in particular, but matching the skills to the employers as well, that we've got to have the workplace receiving the right kind of skilled and talented young people as well, so that we don't have a brain drain, people going to America, taking with them that intellectual property and that could so easily stay within Europe and bring us all out of this economic position that we're in now. Risk-taking as well, largely cultural issue, but risk-taking has to be protected somehow with the social security network, implemented fairly and with equality for Europeans wherever they seem to go. Let me thank our guests today. Janusz Lewandowski, thank you so much, sir. Jonathan Todd, thank you for your time today. Ulla Termes, thank you for your contribution also. Christy Schweving, thank you so much for Austria's perspective on this also. And our students today, Paulina and Celia, thank you so much today. This has been a Euranet Plus broadcast with Polskie Radio, and we hope you've enjoyed the show today. Thank you.